What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to talk about stress. It is that ubiquitous thing that everyone seems to be dealing with, and even if you don't think you do, you probably are dealing with stress. What I'd like to start off with is basically that perception is reality, in that if you perceive that you are dealing with stress or that an event is stressful, then that is physiologically having an effect on your body. So there are kind of different ways to reframe stresses. I read a really good book called The Telomere Effect that talks about how reframing stresses in your life in a more positive manner can actually have longevity boosting effects. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but what I am going to talk about is different types of stress. Really, all the same. Your body perceives it all exactly the same through different fluctuations in hormones. But basically, kind of what I want to talk about is that, like, a lot of times people don't think that they're under stress or the things that they're doing are causing stress, but in reality, they are. The biggest thing in that regard is exercise. So a lot of people view exercise as a way to combat stress, and in a sense, it definitely can be. It can be meditative, especially if you have like a really busy life and that's your time to get away and listen to some tunes or podcasts and like run on the treadmill for an hour or whatever. Like you may leave feeling better, and you probably will due to your endorphins and stuff like that. But in the long term, um, really even in the short term, your body views it as a stress. And in today's society right now, I notice a lot of times that HIIT workouts or high intensity interval training are super, super prevalent. People are so short on time and they're so busy, they want to cram in like maximal effort into the shortest amount of time and kind of get the best like bang for your buck in terms of workout. It's really context dependent. So you kind of have to look at what other stresses you're dealing with in life in order to determine like what workout protocol and even what dietary protocol you want to follow. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying in the last couple of videos I made about carb intake and how carbohydrates can mediate the cortisol response. So the more stressed you are, the more carbs you should probably have. I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at it. The more exercise you do, the more life stress you're experiencing. The day in, day out chronic stress is a lot of the big stress too. It's the acute stuff from things like exercise and heat and cold exposure. But let me just like paint a picture. I'm just going to kind of create a scenario here. Um, so someone who works 5 days a week, you average like 40 hours a week, they hate their job. It's not like maybe not hate, but like they're not happy. They kind of get in fights with their boss. They're not feeling fulfilled. That's creating stress on you. If every day you go to work not looking forward to going to work, that's creating a stress on your body, whether you realize it or not. There's another thing, MSDs or micro stress doses, where from the moment you wake up in the morning, if you're waking up to like a blaring alarm, that's creating a stress on your body. Rushing around, you're behind, stress, traffic, stress, loud noise, cars honking, exhaust fumes, stress, stress, stress. It's cold outside. You're not dressed for the weather, stress. Like all of these things add up, and you basically have a stress threshold. Everyone kind of has a different stress threshold that they can tolerate before it just becomes too much. Eventually, you're not going to be able to create enough cortisol to combat these stresses. And that's something too, is that cortisol gets a really bad rap for being the stress hormone. And like, yes, it's a catabolic hormone. It's used to break down tissues for energy in order to avoid stress, basically. So like in the hunter-gatherer times, it would be, and this is like the classic example, I think it gets overused a lot, but there's a lion and you have to cortisol kicks in and the production of epinephrine to boot your ass into action and like allow you to run away from this lion, and it also downregulates other metabolic processes, so digestion is like severely hindered. So that's a big problem in and of itself in this chronic stress society that we're in today. Digestion is hindered. Digestion's hindered. We're not digesting our food properly, so now we're becoming malnourished, not enough nutrients, which allows us to further not be able to deal with stress as much, and it just kind of snowballs. And it's extremely, extremely common. I always say to people that you can have a perfect nutritional regimen and a perfect exercise regimen, but if you're not dealing with stress and sleeping properly, everything else just goes out the window. It's literally, I mean, it's a bit, maybe a bit of a hyperbole, but like you can almost say that everything else just doesn't matter if you are stressed and not sleeping. And I combine those things together because sleep is, of course, our restorative time, and it allows us to better deal with stresses when you are well rested. So that's definitely something to consider. I want to do a more thorough video on sleep. What I kind of want to talk about again, so we've painted like the work picture, relationship stress, with your significant other, with your friends, with your, family, whatever. If you are in a relationship where you're not happy, where you're fighting all the time, whatever, you don't get along with your kids, you're fighting with your kid because he doesn't want to eat, or doesn't, you fight with him every time you go to bed, or your mother-in-law, like whatever it is, honestly, these things really, really affect us, and it's something to consider, um, when looking at the stresses that you're purposefully putting on your body. So basically, what I'm trying to get at here is when you're looking at your diet and nutrition in your exercise regimen that you're creating for yourself, or that a trainer or health coach is creating for you, if they're not asking you what your life, your day in and day out life is like, and they're like weight loss and muscle gain, we're not data. Humans are not just data. You can't just look at your basal metabolic rate and calories in, calories out, and this and that when coming up with a nutrition plan. There are so many friggin' variables that need to be considered, taken into consideration, that like that's like the number one thing when I meet with people, is that like I want to know how you perceive your stress. Do you deal with depression and anxiety? That's another huge one. Again, sometimes, and I can attest to this because I've dealt with depression and anxiety for like over 10 years. You become so accustomed to it, it just feels normal, but like you have to understand how that is affecting your body and your capabilities of dealing with other stresses. So, for example, if you deal with really extreme depression and anxiety, you should probably not be doing hit workouts. You should probably be doing slower compound movements with like long rest periods, 3-minute rest periods, with good carbohydrate consumption for recovery. Period. Protein, obviously, but like a ketogenic diet is probably not right for you if you are extremely stressed out, nor is fasting. And I'm talking like extreme fasting. So, what I do is I basically fast for maybe like 12 hours a day, which is, I would say, pretty standard. I'm not like going out of my way to do it. I'm not skipping a meal. I mean, I've done so many different types of fasting, one meal a day, where this was when things were like, I thought they were good, but looking back on them, I was so friggin' stressed out, where I would wake up at 5 a.m., work out every morning, and then I would go to work. I worked at a physical job at a factory, no food until I would get home, and then I would eat all my food. Number one, I wasn't getting enough calories in. There's absolutely no friggin' way that in the 2 hour eating window that I had, that I was consuming enough calories. So it's hypocaloric. I was completely fasted through the majority of my physical activity, which was probably not good for a lot of reasons. So yeah, so basically that's kind of what I want to say, is that like look at your stress levels, how you perceive how you're dealing with stress, and like what's going on in your life when considering the foods that you're eating and your training protocol. Something that sticks in my mind was at my last health food store that I was at, there was this girl that came in. She was always asking me questions like, Tyler, I need help. I can't sleep. I'm feeling like garbage, blah, blah, blah. And I knew she was training for some physical event. I think it was like a mud run or something like that. And she was working out 6 days a week for, I think, like an hour and a half at a time. She was having so much caffeine. She literally asked her, I'm like, okay, she's like, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. And I was suggesting some things like magnesium and glycine and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's your caffeine intake like? Oh, well, I have 2 cups of coffee, and then I have a pre-workout, and then I got this greens powder with caffeine in it. And I'm like, well, there's your problem. Like, you're having way too much caffeine, which is a stress on the body, not sleeping, overtraining, like, but she's feeling good post workout, and that's what all that she's looking at is like, oh, but my endorphins and I'm feeling so good and the runner's high and blah blah blah. Just consider it. That's all I'm saying. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. Message me on Instagram. I'll make sure to put that in the info for this video. Of course, this is all for educational purposes, and none of this is medical advice. So thank you for listening. Enjoy your day.